Right. Right. Now though, tier 9 ranked recommendations. I'm just gonna go through all the ships and just give a short overview of what I think. Keep in mind, as always, this is my opinion and my opinion only, based on my own experiences. There's always going to be bias. Some people will enjoy certain ships and blah 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 blah, so on, so on. And in this sprint, you can have two-man divs. So obviously, depending, I'm not gonna cover the ships in divisions. Some ships do better than others in divisions and so forth. I'm not gonna do that because that's a waste of time. And then this quick go through would be like 10 hours long. So holy crap, that would take way too long. Yugumo, decent. Biggest issue is that tier 9 gunboats are amazing, so you're gonna struggle in this thing. Average at best. Kitakaze, probably one of the top tier picks. A ship that can fight enemy DDs, enemy cruisers, enemy battleships, everything. Great concealment, great firepower, basically great everything. Kitakaze is a top tier pick. Oh my god, if my woman is gonna start smashing something, we need to close the door. There we go. Okay. Third, let's see what else we have. Ibuki. No, absolutely do not pick Ibuki. Even a well-played Ibuki is still unlikely to be as strong as basically any other ship, tier 9 cruiser well-played. It's a mid to long range HE spammer, which is really not that effective in ranked. Azuma, same issue, bit more healthful, but basically just an oversized Ibuki. Izuma is actually a pretty decent battleship these days thanks to all the buffs. 57mm deck armor helps mitigate some of the damage. The AP penetration is monstrously good, so honestly I wouldn't say that's bad. There's a bit of an echo, so let me open a door or two. There we go. Open up some closet doors to mitigate the echo a bit. Yeah, Izumo, just of all the battleships, a pretty average pick at best. Musashi is extremely strong. What the hell is that? Musashi is extremely strong if it develops into a battleship heavy meta. Because Musashi just bullies almost all other battleships. Thanks to the overmatch, the ridiculous health pool, and so forth. It is great against battleships and cruisers, pretty shit against DDs, because the big downside, of course, the turret traverse is atrocious. Fletcher, one of the victims of power creep. Fletcher is still an okay pick, but there are better choices for tier 9 destroyer. It's not that it's bad, but I mean, in a division, Fletcher, once again, well, I don't want to go into division play, as I said, because the video will be so long, but Fletcher does have American smokes, which means as a division DD, it can be quite strong, because you can just smoke up some cruiser or something for ages. Benham, depends on the meta that develops, but generally speaking, Benham isn't normally as good in ranked as it is in random, because you end up having to fight a lot of other DDs in gun battles, and the Benham is pretty terrible at it. Great torpedo spammer, but if it becomes any sort of DD versus DD duels, then Benham is trash. Black is gonna be probably always a top tier pick. Even with the bad torpedoes, it can counter enemy DDs so incredibly well. So Black is probably going to be a very strong pick, as always. It's especially if you happen to division with something like a Kitagaze or Mogador. Well, once again, Black is an amazing division ship because you bring spotting, you bring smoke. So you will find ways to deal with a lot. Buffalo, pretty good ship. I wouldn't say top tier cruisers. There's Alaska for top tier cruiser if you want to play an American radar, but Buffalo is okay. Heavy American armor, well, heavy 27, which is pretty damn good at tier 9, and improved pen angles, super heavy American AP. The downside is the broadside you have to give, and of course you have 10-kilometer radar. Seattle is pretty terrible. You can make it work. It can be decent in divisions, once again, if someone smokes you up, so your biggest vulnerability, basically how squishy you are, is mitigated. If that gets mitigated, then you have good DPM, you got radar, a lot of consumables, and so forth. But overall, the biggest issue of the Seattle is the poor firing angles, which forces you to expose a lot of broadside. Alaska is a fantastic pick. It's amazing in randoms. It's going to be amazing in ranked. Radar, incredible health pool, tankiness, including that 36mm deck armor. Very low citadel. That's not actually the citadel. The citadel is down here. Extremely low citadel, hard to hit. Improved pen angles, 305mm guns. Alaska is great. I rated it as a tier 9.5 because it's just straight up overpowered. Iowa, not really. There are better American choices. Iowa isn't that bad of a ship, 406s and decent speed, but especially if it becomes DD Fiesta, then the lack of torpedo protection and of course the fact that you have American armor, which means 35mm and 90mm plating, is gonna be a huge issue for you. Missouri, the better choice thanks to the radar. Just straight up upgrade from the Iowa thanks to the radar. Georgia is obviously going to be the best of these three. Georgia has a ton of advantages going for it. It can overmatch 30mm plating or overmatch it. It's got great gun dispersion. It has incredible secondaries. It has insane speed. It can break 40 knots with that speed boost. It's got the fast reloading heals, which means that it's very hard to burst down as well. Georgia is just a god tier pick. It's going to be really, really good, I think. Moving on to the Soviets. Udaloy, it's honestly no. If you want to play a gunboat, you play the French. Udaloy is just gonna struggle, I think. Udaloy is not really that good of a ship. It's not a bad farmer, which is why it works okay in randoms, but in ranked you rarely will get opportunities to actually actively farm the enemy, so not my choice. Same issue with the Tashkent. Mid to long range destroyer, but it lacks that close combat utility. Is it 3 versus 3? Well, okay. Is it gonna be 3 versus 3 the sprint? Is that small scale? Yeah, 3 versus 3. Well, you're on small maps. Okay. Well, then I probably like this even less. Then these secondary builds are going to be so much stronger. Shit, I didn't know that. Secondary build battleships are going to be so much stronger on that. And Ibuki and Azuma are basically completely shut out. Complete shit. So absolutely not. If it's 3 versus 3, don't even consider them. Holy crap, they're going to be bad. Neustra might be an okay pick, just because it's so incredibly hard to kill this thing. But you do lack significant gunpowder. And gunpowder in a small scale 3 versus 3 is going to be incredibly important because, well, I didn't realize it was 3 versus 3. Basically, 3 versus 3 means that the gunpowder weight on everyone's shoulders becomes heavier, which means playing an Sashimi that has basically no gunpowder is an issue. Because let's say your cruiser DD versus cruiser DD, them having more DPM is more important than you being able to survive. Basically being able to add into the fight with significant damage. Kitagaza is just going to be a god tier pick for that then. Kitagaza is going to be fantastic because you can help your cruiser against battleships. You can help anyone against anything with those guns. So Kita is going to be top tier. Donskoy, so squishy for it. So squishy for it. I think, nah. Riga might be a good pick. If it's small maps, especially Riga is going to shine so extremely well. It can tank the battleship quite easily with 35mm plating. Silviu, Udria, thank you for the 3. And of course the great guns, the great close range performance. Stealth radar, which allows you to ambush enemy DDs and cruisers. Riga is going to be an absolute top tier pick, easily. Kronstadt, probably going to be a pretty strong pick, just because it's so stupidly tanky. It's like bringing... If you bring this plus something like a secondary battleship, you're gonna have a lot of firepower and just be very, very hard to take down anything from it. Riga is complete garbage on map foul. Okay, buddy. Sovietsky Soyuz, stupidly tanky. Oh yeah, you don't get Hydra on Kronstadt, do you? You don't get Hydra on Kronstadt. Oh, that could be with the DD in the game. That could absolutely be a huge downside. I mean, you can mitigate that with close to the DD, but still pretty risky. saying that Riga is gonna be garbage for this is so amusing, considering Riga is one of the few cruisers we have here that can actually 1 versus 1 the battleship as well and win against him, because it can citadel him. This thing is really, really strong. And the idea that you can just angle is gonna be very, very difficult if you're not facing... Basically, if the enemy team blobs up as 1, sure. But if they have any sort of game concept, you're gonna be in trouble. Russia is worse Sovietsky Soyuz. Why would you pick this? Z46, oh Jesus, no. Just no. It's gonna be a lot of 1 versus 1. Well, I was assumed we're gonna see a lot of radar cruisers, and I'm gonna struggle to see this one being very useful. The lack of firepower is gonna be a huge issue. Runes... Sorry, fuck. Coffee in the wrong throat. Rune's greatest issue is gonna be the port firing angles. You wanna be able to go nose in, push, whereas Rune's guns are in the back. You're gonna struggle to deal damage in the Rune. Siegfried might actually be okay for small scale. It might be okay for the small scale, because there's less of that crossfire potential. But even so, and I mean, it's a threat of YOLOing the battleship as well, but even so, the lack of radar on it is gonna mean any smoke comms are gonna do extremely well against this thing. Questionable. Same thing with the Aegir. FDG might be pretty meme worthy, just secondary FDG, because it's so small scale, which means secondary builds are gonna be surprisingly strong. But I think Pommern is actually gonna be excellent for this. Pommern loves small scale fights. And Pommern just straight up loves for small scale fights, and this is going to be the definition of a small scale. And Pommern brings a lot of secondary firepower, can't overmatch, but he can probably melt any battleship it faces, hydro, torpedoes. For small scale, I think Pommern might be surprisingly effective. I think this one would be a good one. Jutland, for the solo play, it's going to be god tier. I don't see any issue where the Jutland wouldn't be extremely strong. It has heal, hydro, smokes, great gunpowder, good torpedoes, especially against nose-in ships. You can just single launch your torps at it. I would see Jutland being an absolute top tier destroyer. Neptune, okay, come on. Why would you bring a Neptune to this? Please don't, that's a meme. Drake might see some use, but honestly, like Drake is for the heavy American crew, heavy British cruisers. Drake is pretty decent, but the lack of radar makes it a suspect choice in my book. Lion, oh god, don't ever bring a Lion to tier 9. That's terrible. Mogador might be really good. Mogador might be excellent for this. Just really hard to deal with the Mogador. Just so much firepower torpedo. Generally, you would probably want to pair it with a radar, so that you can utilize the radar to put in that Mogador damage, but Mogador can fight basically any ship quite well, so absolutely going to be a threat. St. Louis, mid to long range, not that strong a close range. Also, it doesn't quite have that lovely troll armor that we have on the Henry. It's not quite as effective. It can help you, but I don't know. You don't have the 240s either, only 203s. St. Louis isn't a bad ship, but I struggle to see its value here. Alsace, well, if you have Chambart, Chambart is just a better Alsace for this, because once again, you can play the nose in instead of having to give broadside to use the back turret. Chambart will have some good advantages, namely the great profile, the reload booster. The problem is, of course, the lack of armor and lack of overmatch, which means that it's fairly easy to deal with a Chambart unless you're creating some sort of crossfire with a Changmu. I would assume if people play Changmu, it's for the radar, but that kind of feels like a poor man's USS Black. Baiji, same issues that Izumo has. It's not really that effective at closer ranges. Well, it's not that it's not that effective. It's more that all its advantages are at long and mid ranges, great pen and long range dispersion, and at close range those don't really translate, and it is quite vulnerable. But in DC, I guess it can be an okay pick, but with the super cruisers in the game, hard to justify as well, and no radar as well, and no one to struggle to see it. Östergötland might be a decent pick if you just forego the whole smoke thing entirely. Good gunpowder, good torps, just fair.
Obviously, the environment down here is all salt. The ceiling's salt,
It remains
the
to be
walls
seen.
are salt.
Remains to be seen how well
to
the
an
ship
extent,
does.
the air is salt.
10,000
What
suns,
kind
thank
of
you for
comps
25.
do you see being spammed this season?
Friesland, I think, is going to struggle simply for the simple reason that he does well. I don't know. The Friesland might be an okay. Actually, it's got fairly long duration smokes, doesn't it? I guess you can kind of smoke up a teammate and then just farm from it, but Friesland doesn't really open water gunboat that well, so it's rather smoke dependent, and the enemy team will almost certainly bring some sort of counter against smokes. And the lack of torpedoes means that it's pretty easy to just bully a Friesland out of a smoke. I think something like a Pommer just pushing a Friesland, what does the Friesland do except run away?
What are you new? Did you
Which I
just
think
pick
is
up the
gonna
game?
be
I
an
need
issue.
to know. This is
Coffee 9, thank you for the
This is
sun.
fucking animal research.
Anything that decides to rush the Friesland will kill him. Yeah, that's the problem. And I think, honestly, Östergötland as well struggles with being outspotted. I think the two strongest picks for this season will be, DD-wise, or maybe the three will be Jutland and Kitakaze, with potential dash of USS Black in there, and Mogador in some comps. I think those are just the strongest DDs. Battleship wise, I think secondaries are going to be brutally good in this. In small scale secondary builds, like small scale secondary comps always beat tank comps, because it's more valuable to deal damage than try to survive it. When a lot of people are shooting at you, being able to disengage and survive is more important, but in small scale, more damage, being able to melt the enemy is more important. So just the likes of Pommern and even FDG secondary builds and Georgia are gonna be very, very good, most likely. As for cruisers, Alaska is gonna be a monstrously good pick. What other besides Alaska, really? I think Alaska just has all the great tools for this. It's good against basically every single class with good armor, hydro radar. I think this one is gonna be my top tier cruiser pick. Riga will be good, but not nearly as good as Alaska. And Riga will struggle against players that actively angle against it, which means if you do have Riga, you need someone that can deal with the angle chips. Like, Riga can force the enemy to angle, but then you need someone to be able to abuse that angle target. So something like Riga Kitakaze might work really well, just for the smoke and then melting the nose in target. See, the Germans might also do decently, once again, because small scale and torps and good guns might benefit. Still though, Soyuz ignores secondaries. True, Soyuz does ignore secondaries, but Soyuz, on the other hand, if you do get to rush him down, Soyuz has a gigantic citadel to blap. This one doesn't have Kremlin's, like, the main difference here, the reason why Soyuz is so much easier to citadel is, you see that angled plating, then you compare it to this. You see the way the armor slopes outwards? This is what gives the citadel such incredible resiliency on the Kremlin and makes it very, very troll even while full broadside. The Sovietsky Soyuz completely lacks this. So if you can force a brawl with the Sovietsky, he just gets annihilated because he's got that flat armor. Does he know there are divs in this sprint and is ignoring me, or just not seeing what I'm writing? I'm well aware there's divs in this. Jesus. I mentioned divisions multiple times. Like, can't tell if I'm going mad or if there's fiddling in the background. My girlfriend is putting up curtains in the room as we're talking, so... Mitä? Onhan, niin siellä on 9. Sama määrä, kun mä käytin tuon toisen.
Oikeesti.
Joo.
Isot välit.
No sun pitää jättää vähän isommat välit. Paljon sä oot käyttänyt? Joku 5 senttiä gäppiä. Kyllä ne 9 pitäisi riittää. Getting curtains, boys. What about chip combinations? Do you recommend them? Well, I would say things like Mogador plus radar is always going to be hugely oppressive. Mogador with the radar chip. Or just a raw DPM chip plus something like a USS Black. Kitakaze with basically anything will work well. Pommern, a push comp would be really brutal as well. Something like Pommern Alaska Black. Not sure how you deal with that. You got basically perma radar, so the DD has to keep constant distance at all times. Oh, you can't have 3-man div. Oh yeah, it's gonna be 2-man. Then I'd probably go Pommern Alaska. You can kind of deal with anything, and whatever DD you get is a bonus. If your DD dies, then you can make up for it by having Hydra and Radar. Kiitos. Hey, I got curtains, boys. Basically, any of the top picks together, the reason why they aren't top picks is because they're so good at kind of everything.
I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius.
Mut pistikö se sen ihan löysästi, koska mä pistin kiinni tuohon tummempaa kohtaan. Et se, ne koukut otti kiinni siinä missä paksumpi on. Siksi on just täydellisesti, kun toi tulee vähän liian pitkäksi, kun se ei ole kiinni niissä tummemmassa kohdassa. Tiedätkö, siinä missä se kangas menee paksummaksi, mä pistin sen siihen kiinni.
Ai siis tässä?
Joo, siihen reunaan pistin kiinni. Koska sitä vartenhan se kangaskaja on siinä.
Ihan kun tässä jos turhaa duunin tänään.
No ei mene aika tylsäksi. Sorry about that. Big projects going on. Getting curtains. Nobody speaks Finnish, true. Noniin.
Onks nyt?
Kato, nyt se on täydellinen.
Hyvä.
Kato ne. Jep.
Sitten vähän saat meidän seuraavan verran.
Same kun näkis. There we go. Chat, I have curtains. And look at that height. Look at that perfect height. Textbook perfect. Truly peak.